had the answer in 1838. He did not publish it for 21 years. Not because he wasn't sure. He was sure. Because he knew exactly what it would do to the world when it landed. Charles Darwin spent 2 decades writing careful letters to friends, collecting barnacles, raising pigeons, studying earthworms, all while sitting on an idea that would remove human beings from the center of creation. An idea that would make God optional. An idea that the church would call blasphemy, that polite society would call obscene, that his own wife would find quietly, privately, heartbreaking. He published it anyway. This is the story of the most consequential idea in the history of biology, and the man who was almost too afraid to tell it. Charles Robert Darwin was born in 1809 in Shrewsbury, England. His father was a wealthy doctor. His grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, had already written half a century earlier that species might somehow transform over time. Nobody had taken it seriously. Darwin was not a brilliant student. He failed to become a doctor. The sight of surgery made him faint. He studied theology at Cambridge with no particular enthusiasm. What he was, from childhood, was an obsessive collector. Beetles, rocks, bird eggs, fossils. He collected not casually, but with the focused intensity of a man who could not stop noticing things. In 1831, at 22 years old, he was offered an unpaid position aboard a Royal Navy survey ship, HMS Beagle. The voyage was supposed to last 2 years. It lasted 5. And it changed everything. The Beagle sailed to South America around Cape Horn, across the Pacific to Australia and back. Darwin went ashore at every port. He walked inland, he climbed mountains, he collected thousands of specimens. Plants, insects, birds, bones, fossils, and shipped them home to England in crates. But it was one stop, a small volcanic archipelago 600 miles west of Ecuador, that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The Galápagos Islands. He was there for 5 weeks. On each island, separated by only a few miles of ocean, he found the same birds, finches. And yet, on each island, the finches were different. Different beaks, different shapes, different behaviors. Each one perfectly suited to the food available on its particular island. He didn't understand it yet. He filed the specimens away, labeled them badly, and sailed on to Tahiti. But the question would not leave him. He returned to England in 1836. He was 27 years old. He never left Britain again. Over the next 2 years, he read everything he could find. He talked to breeders of dogs, pigeons, cattle, horses. He studied how breeders selected traits across generations. He read Thomas Malthus, an economist who wrote that populations always grow faster than the food supply can support them. Which means always more creatures are born than can possibly survive. And in that moment, reading Malthus in his study in 1838, Darwin understood. If more creatures are born than can survive, and creatures vary from one another, then the ones with variations best suited to their environment are more likely to survive. And if they survive, they pass those variations to their offspring. And if this happens across thousands of generations, across millions of years, species change. New species emerge. Old ones disappear. Not because God designed them that way, because nature selected them. Blindly, mechanically, without intention or plan. He called it natural selection. He wrote the idea down in a private notebook. He told almost no one. And then he waited. Why did he wait? The honest answer is he was afraid. Not of ridicule, not of professional embarrassment. He was afraid of what the idea would do to the people he loved. His wife, Emma, was a devout Christian. She had written him a letter, early in their marriage, expressing her fear that his scientific skepticism would separate them in eternity. He kept that letter until he died. He also knew, precisely and carefully, that his theory threatened the entire intellectual foundation of Victorian England. The church was not an institution on the margins of society. It was society. It ran the schools, it ran the hospitals, it defined morality, it explained suffering, it told people why they were here. And Darwin was about to tell them that humanity was not made in God's image. That humanity was made by the same blind, indifferent process that made barnacles. He wrote to his closest friend, the botanist Joseph Hooker, in 1844, "I am almost convinced that species are not immutable. It is like confessing a murder." A murder. He knew exactly what he was killing. What finally forced his hand was a letter that arrived in June 1858. It came from a young naturalist named Alfred Russel Wallace, writing from the jungles of the Malay archipelago. Enclosed was a short paper. Wallace had arrived at the same theory independently, completely. 20 years of Darwin's work, his notebooks, his evidence, his meticulous accumulation, was about to be scooped by a letter from the tropics. Darwin was devastated. His friends arranged a joint presentation of both papers. Wallace, graciously, and perhaps because he had little choice, agreed. And Darwin sat down, in 14 months of furious writing, and produced the book he had been circling for 2 decades. On the Origin of Species, published November 24, 1859. The entire first print run, 1,250 copies, sold out on the day of publication. The reaction was everything Darwin had feared, and everything he had hoped. The church denounced him, bishops called the book an insult to God, newspapers ran cartoons of Darwin with the body of an ape. At a famous debate in Oxford in 1860, a bishop named Samuel Wilberforce asked Darwin's defender, the biologist Thomas Huxley, whether he was descended from an ape on his grandfather's side or his grandmother's. Huxley replied, quietly, that he would rather be descended from an ape than from a man who used his intelligence to obscure the truth. The room allegedly erupted. Darwin was not there. He was at home, sick, reading the letters as they arrived. He spent most of his adult life sick, plagued by an illness doctors still cannot explain with certainty: nausea, exhaustion, heart palpitations. He sometimes worked only 2 hours a day. In those 2 hours, he changed the world. What Darwin actually argued is simpler and stranger than most people realize. He did not say humans evolved from apes. He said humans and apes share a common ancestor. We are cousins, very distant cousins. He did not say evolution has a direction, that it is progress, that humans are the goal. He said evolution has no direction, no plan, no purpose, just variation, selection, and time. A bacterium that has survived for 3 billion years is, by the only measure evolution recognizes, just as successful as a human being. This is what the church found so disturbing. Not just that humans were related to animals, but that humans were not special in any cosmic sense, were not intended, were not the point. We were, like every other creature on Earth, accidents that happened to work. Darwin lived quietly at Down House in Kent for the last 40 years of his life. He walked the same path in his garden every day. He called it his thinking path. He studied earthworms with the same attention he had once given to finches. He wrote to hundreds of correspondents. He published 12 more books. He never stopped working. He also never fully resolved the tension between his theory and his faith, or between his theory and Emma's faith. He described himself in his autobiography as an agnostic, a word coined by his friend Thomas Huxley specifically to describe people like Darwin. Not an atheist, not a believer, a man who looked honestly at the evidence and said, "I don't know." He died in 1882 at 73. He was buried in Westminster Abbey at the insistence of the scientific establishment, a few feet from Isaac Newton. The church that had denounced him presided over the funeral. What Darwin actually gave us was not despair. It was honesty. Before Darwin, the story of humanity was a story of intention. We were made. We were wanted. We were the purpose of the whole enterprise. After Darwin, the story changed. We are not the purpose, we are the result. The product of 4 billion years of life trying to survive. Adapting, failing, dying, adapting again. Every instinct you have, to love your children, to fear death, to seek connection, to feel wonder, was shaped by what worked, by what kept our ancestors alive long enough to become us. That is not a diminishment. That is a staggering story. Darwin did not remove meaning from life. He changed where we look for it. Not from above, from within, from the long, improbable, magnificent chain of creatures who survived so that you could be here, watching this, wondering why. The last line of On the Origin of Species is one of the most beautiful sentences in the English language. Darwin wrote, "There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers, having been originally breathed into a few forms or into one, and that, whilst this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning endless forms most beautiful and most wonderful have been, and are being evolved." Endless forms most beautiful and most wonderful. The man who spent 21 years afraid to publish his idea ended it with wonder. Subscribe to The Examined Lives. Next week, the man who looked at his own mind and found something terrifying inside it. Carl Jung, the shadow self, the idea that the person you are most afraid of is the one you haven't met yet. See you then.